If the cost of energy was to drop 30% per year, our society would be radically different.
Why does copper work here in a way that it doesn't over distances?
It's a very phenomenally reliable system. It's 2 orders of magnitude more reliable than optics.
How do you survive in this AI era without embracing 996 hustle mentality?
Success doesn't come from working 18 hours a day. Success comes from prioritizing what's important.
What are some of the kind of hard-earned lessons that comes from having gone through those cycles that younger builders today that may be listening would be wise to adopt?
The reality is you have to bet on people. And so you got 30 things to do. Tell me what the top 5 are and do them.
What is a consensus viewpoint today about AI, data centers, networking that you feel like when we look back in 5 years, people are going to be dead wrong about?
Well, first off,
hey climbers, thanks so much for joining me on this episode of Climb today. I'm so thrilled to have Dave Welch as the founder and CEO of AttoTude, where he is rethinking how AI data centers move data and use power. Before AttoTude, he co-founded Infinera and helped grow it into a major player in global networking. He spent more than 4 decades building high-performance networks and holds advanced degrees and many patents in the field. I'm excited to dig in with him on how AI broke the old data center model and how an old world technology like terahertz radio might actually offer the solution. This will be a fun one. Thanks so much for joining me, Dave.
thanks, Jay.
Well, I want to talk about how and why AI broke the old data center model. But before we do that, before this AI boom, how was the industry designing data centers and what assumptions from those old days just look dead wrong today?
You got to go back to the days when Google started transforming the modern IT network. And what they were really doing is really trying to aggregate information. They'd pick a few spots around the country where they're going to replicate all this information. Meta came in and they had a lot of video content, and they did the same type of thing. And those data centers were designed specifically for, retrieve and recall information. Well, that's a pretty serial operation that expanded. It moved from people retrieving and recalling information to, hey, now I need the information to start interacting together. And today what you're seeing is the machines are communicating in ensemble much more than in a serial fashion. And there goes the CPU, here comes the GPU.
And when you think about things like latency, power, reliability, these are terms that we hear thrown around in the press when it comes to data centers. What do they mean in practicality before and today?
Yeah, so latency, there are 2 territories that latency matters. Latency that you, the driver of a car, says, I can't wait to get that piece of information. I need to have it super fast. Okay, well that latency, you're, milliseconds, hundreds of microseconds type of thing. There's a second latency is, say, I've got a lot of processors working in parallel. I can't get out of sync. Well, now you're talking hundreds of nanoseconds. You're much tighter latency requirements. When they talk about latency in a GPU cluster, they're talking about these machines trying to think in parallel and make sure their various parallel lines don't get out of sync or don't hold up the show.
Yeah.
And on the application side, where it's going out to you as the user, there it's really about edge latency. I can't go to some big central data center. I got to go to an edge data center and get what I want out of it.
Yeah, and especially as you think about how AI starts to interface with the real world, you've got robots in these factories, you've got humanoids now that are being discussed. Latency, because it could be a harm to a human interacting with that piece of machinery, starts to feel like a really important concern. Why did that multi-layer switch and fiber model work for the old web, and why does it break down today?
They don't need the level of computation that they need today. All you got to do is look at the large language model. The amount of computation that you have to go through and for looking at these massive matrices and information correlations, if you did that in a serial event, it would take you, and it does take you, forever.
Yeah.
The only way you can do that is have massive parallel computations today. Now, not everything's about LLMs or large language models.
Yeah, well, but it's a good use case, right? So what use case that I think a lot of folks understand, the more LLM queries there are, which only continues to hockey stick up, or whatever you want to call this version of growth, the more queries there are, the more compute is needed, the more agentic transactions are happening, the more compute is needed, and as a result, the more parallel processing is needed. Is that the right way to think about it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And as they develop all the infrastructure for the parallel processing, more and more other types of computations are getting done, exercised in that fashion. And that's why you've seen the market share of GPUs versus CPUs is completely inverted.
Yeah.
Right.
You've talked in the past about the power and energy demand changing as well.
Mm-hmm.
When you go from tens of kilowatts to, potentially gigawatt scale.
Uh-huh.
When you look at the modern AI rack today,
Mm-hmm.
where does the power go, and how is it different today?
The rack architecture is driven by how many GPUs I can get to talk as a low latency cluster.
Yeah.
Right. Continue to talk about architectures where you're putting a megawatt of power or approaching a megawatt of power in a rack.
Yeah.
And I can't even contemplate it. It wasn't too long ago when whole data centers were 5, 10 megawatts.
When most people hear the words like optics and photonics, they couldn't really tell you the difference. When you explain classical optics, silicon photonics, and radio-based approach, how do you compare and contrast those and kind of where they've been most used in the past?
The clarity of terms, optics. So optics is the management of light. Whether it's a lens, my glasses, my contact lenses. I classify photonics a little bit differently. The photonics at the first order is the generation of light. Specifically, it usually correlates to what's called recombination, and they come in the form of lasers and LEDs. The whole world of what is historically being considered fiber optics or photonics is really centered in and around the concept that I'm going to have to get to a piece of silica fiber. This is God's gift to communications engineers. It's phenomenal stuff if I'm going hundreds of kilometers. You can send information over that optical fiber forever. It's cheap, it's lightweight. The problem isn't the fiber. The problem is the fiber requires you to operate at a length at the minimum loss of that fiber. I got to get my data, it's in the gigahertz, up to that 200 terahertz in order to get on that fiber. So how do I upconvert it? I mix it with a laser source, and I mix my data. The data I understand. I love the simple analogy, if I may.
Yeah.
FM radio.
Yeah.
What is it? I got 100 kilohertz of information I really want. That's my music. What do? I mix it to get up to 98.5 or whatever megahertz, because that's where the airway is low loss, and I can pick up my FM signal out of the air. Almost all communication works in that fashion. You upconvert the data you're interested to a frequency where you have low loss. In the case of photonics, that's to access the silica fiber. The beauty of that is the fiber. The burden of that is you need lasers and you need optical modulators.
Yeah.
And then you start to realize you're paying for power.
So the trade-offs, as I understand it, is fiber optics is great when you want to go a long distance, not necessarily great when you want to have the lowest latency.
Fiber optics is unique if you want to go hundreds of kilometers. You're not going underwater at these bandwidths unless you're going in fiber. It's a very special media to send information over. When I'm inside a data center, typical distances that you might want to do is scale up. Well, they might be a meter or 10 meters inside the data center. Fiber is still very viable, but it might not be the best and only choice. And so for very short distances, kind of the 1.5 meters, 2 meters, they use copper cables.
Why does copper work here in a way that it doesn't over distances?
Turns out reliability is also a very key parameter. And so you think about, hey, if I've got one interconnection between these 2 points, I can afford some small amount of errors. It's a very, phenomenally reliable system. But now I'm going to have parallel lines, right? Well, if I got 10 times more parallel lines, then actually the reliability I'm interested is of the computed function. If I've got 10 lines operating, I need a reliability that's 10 times better. And if I got 1,000 lines operating, well, I need a reliability that's 1,000 times better. Otherwise, I'm going to start having more frequent failures in my computation.
Yep.
And the failure in computation usually results in having to redo the computation, and that costs money.
Yeah.
So reliability actually becomes a really key issue. They use copper. First order, it's 2 orders of magnitude more reliable than optics. It's cheaper, but it's bulky. So, and I talked about previously like FM radio, where you take your data, you up convert it, and then you send it. On copper, you don't. It's
Okay.
the only portion of the link where you send what's called baseband. I don't up convert to go over that copper. I actually try to transmit very low data rates and very high data rates over one media. So copper has the benefit of it's cheaper, it's very reliable, but it doesn't transmit fast and high-speed information very well. So the faster you go, the more difficulty you have in getting over a copper wire.
Yeah, you said this line before, which was replacing lasers with transistors.
Mm-hmm.
So in simple terms, why does that shift matter, and how is it practically applied inside of a data center?
Get rid of the laser and the transmitter for a second.
Sure.
What I got to do is I got to take my bandwidth and I'm going to mix it. I got to up convert it to a higher frequency. To do that, I need what's called a local oscillator. Lasers, i.e. making an oscillator at 200 terahertz, is going to cost you somewhere around, let's call it 2 to 4 watts.
Okay.
If I'm going to make an oscillator at 1 terahertz, which is what we do, and make it out of transistors, it's going to cost you a few hundred milliwatts. So the oscillator, although the oscillator is still a significant portion of our power, it is way less power than if I was making a laser.
Yeah.
Right.
That's meaningful.
Oh, it's very meaningful. Yeah, very meaningful.
Yeah. Well, especially as in the public zeitgeist, energy availability, power availability, how you smooth the power and demand curves around data centers continues to be a topic for local communities that are having data centers put into their communities. Anywhere that you can get power performance in the favor of the data center is actually a meaningful change.
Power reduction, or more realistically, power efficiency.
Yeah.
The more computations I can get for the power that I can get into that data center, the better. Spending power on interconnection, all that does is take away power from the computation itself. You'd like to have the interconnection cost you nothing, right? And you put all your energy that you have into whatever that GPU does.
So we've kind of danced around it a little bit here, but I'd love for you to actually introduce us to AttoTude and what you're building.
Sure. Yeah. AttoTude first. The name comes from Atto, which is 10 to the minus 18, a small number, and tude, which is in Latin is kind of the essence of. Altitude is the essence of height. AttoTude is the essence of small. And so AttoTude is all about a paradigm change in the technology of these interconnects. The world has 2 interconnects right now. They have copper, which can go a meter, and optics, but there's something in between, which is radios that can also fit within a fiber. So what we've figured out is that if you can make terahertz radio, you can fit it into a fiber or a waveguide that looks a lot like that silica fiber, but is optimized for terahertz. And so in doing so, what you do is you get the reliability of electronics, you get the cost structure of electronics, you get the power structure of electronics, but you get the user experience of having that fiber. And you can do it without having any photonics in the system. And the photonics require unique manufacturing lines. And I spent 40 years in the industry. I love photonics. It's really a phenomenal science. But when I get down to these shorter distances, there's a better solution.
I'd love to get into your background a little bit here. How did you come to this problem, and what experience brought you to realizing, hey, it could be a better option here?
I literally spent 40 years developing photonics. With that as a background, and I see the needs of this, especially this scale-up application, the number of links that they need to close are hundreds of millions of units, and frankly, not too far off are going to be billions of units. Well, the optics industry doesn't do billions of units today. The silicon industry does. The transistor industry does billions of units. And so you look at that and said, well, usually it's safer, it's easier to take pre-existing manufacturing technology and apply it to the new problem than it is to go figure out a whole new manufacturing technology.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we approached the problem differently. And actually there's a really cool technology, University of Southampton, in the UK, was looking at the hollow core fiber. Hollow core fiber was the first time you got to ask yourself, well, this is interesting because I used to have a silica fiber, but now I don't have. I'm in air, but I'm inside this fiber. Okay, so you get to ask yourself, what's the right wavelength or frequency that I want to be at now. And instead of 1.5 microns, maybe it's 1 micron, maybe it's some other wavelength. And I looked at it and said, no, I really think we should figure out how to make fiber that can take the frequencies that transistors can generate.
Yeah.
Right. Take advantage of this extremely large scale manufacturing opportunity. Revamp the fiber to match to the powers and scales of electronics.
When you are speaking to a data center or hyperscaler or somebody who you feel like needs to adopt this in order to get to the level of parallel processing that they need to do, what education is needed? What preconceived notions do they have that you need to kind of break and re-educate a little bit?
Yeah, so it's actually really funny, and I enjoy watching human behavior. Right, there are two camps. There are the guys over here that made all the radios, and you can make a list: Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cellular, microwave, FM, whatever. All these communications engineers over there, they make incredible radios, and they never think about fiber. And you go over here to the photonics guys, and they've spent their life, everything they do has to get in that silica fiber. I need to move from that frequency. Everything they've done has always been around about that. And that's where, when I talk to either one of the groups, I got one guy that says, well, that's nice. You'll never get it into a fiber. I said, well, I have a fiber, and it gets in there, and it's really works pretty well. And then the guys up here on the silicon, they go, well, that's crazy because we've been working on optics for the silica fiber. Why would I ever want to leave? I said, well, reliability, power, cost.
Yep.
So it takes people a while to scratch their head, and I challenge the listeners and the industry. I said, what if you could do it? What changes? And then you look at it and say, is it worth it to change that infrastructure? And my answer is, it's hugely worth it.
Who needs to be convinced? Who is the buyer in this, and ultimately, who implements this?
Well, this is where it's interesting. In the scale-up market, how do they do it today? Yeah. They do it with ASICs and copper. Those guys. So what they would like to do is have someone say that my electronics work, and something that looks a lot like copper works for me. And what we offer is in their architecture, we're adding one more stage to their electronics, and it's an up conversion stage.
Yep.
Right? If I said, if you just attach this up conversion stage to whatever you want to send over there, well, then I can get you in a media that will carry that. And my up conversion stage just needs to get to, ballpark a terahertz on that, and you can do that electronically. And we've done it electronically. Yep.
And so seeing is believing in that case.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What gives you the confidence that this radio-based approach can be adopted? How close to a one-to-one is it inside of a data center, or do they have to change the way that they currently operate in order to adopt the technology?
Well, a couple things. Anytime you bring in a new technology, if you say you're going to wipe out all the old technology, you're wrong. So all technologies, you bring in something, they always have pluses and minuses to them, and so they find their home. And so what am I looking to do? I'm not looking to shove my technology in something it doesn't deserve to be in. Yeah. Right. But it creates a new opportunity for this. And so and scale up happens to be the magical network. They're not looking for scale up. They don't need hundreds of meters of distance. They need meters of distance. Yeah. Right. But what they need is speed, and they need cost. Right. The prices for optics are coming down, but it used to be at least an order of magnitude delta between a copper link and an optics link, right? And if someone's used to buying something for a buck, well, they don't like paying $10 next time it comes around.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Are there other innovations today in your world that you feel like are going to look obvious in hindsight in the future? Looking
back, investments in e-commerce. So in 2000, the Y2K event, in and around that time frame came e-commerce. I'll never forget the I was driving down 101 and I had my radio on, which I almost never listen to radio anymore. And there was an ad by Amazon. And you listen to the ad and they're talking about this infinite warehouse of books. It's like, well, this is obvious. And the investment community bought heavily into thousands of different e-commerce stores. The macro for e-commerce was dead on. The micro of the thousands or tens of thousands of little e-commerce sites, yeah, there were way more losers than winners. But the macroeconomics of the bulk investment in the e-commerce was dead on. AI, and actually going back, looking one more moment at that time, what fueled the transition in those times? Well, you had the complete movement of advertising revenue, a restructuring of the news media that is still going through restructuring today, and then you had the e-commerce come on. So this new tool of the network and ultimately of data center infrastructures really disrupted a tremendous amount of industries. Initially, the infrastructure costs didn't quite see where all this added revenue was coming from. But what settled out of there was the data centers became the source of the revenue, and the carriers, the people that brought the information to your eyeballs, actually didn't grow that much.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the AI guy comes along, and it's going to be the AI data center versus the CPU data center. Now, it's hard to come up with all the revenues that justify $1 trillion worth of infrastructure build, and there are definitely some identifiable savings, but not a couple $1 trillion worth of, and it's going to come in the form of new revenue streams that people didn't predict.
Yeah.
Right, and once you make this capability forward, there's the obvious ones, faster software development, maybe some video content creation, faster response times on paperwork and stuff like that. But somewhere out there are some really big revenue generators that people are betting on, and I think they're there, but I don't think we truly understand how it transforms.
Yeah, I mean, I think to riff on that for a second, I think it's the labor piece that I think folks are really digging at right now, investors are digging at, but I think the size of that market is still underestimated. I think we don't fully appreciate how much busy work human beings actually do until that work is automated by AI.
Yeah.
And then, I think in my world, or as an early stage investor, I think that's why we see some of these companies that are able to scale as quickly as they have, in software specifically, because they don't have some of those limitations anymore. They've now built a team of agents to handle in parallel, 10 different tasks that they normally would have had to either hire 10 people for, or they would hire one person and they would do those 10 tasks sequentially. And now you don't have that constraint. All you have to do is pay for tokens.
Yeah, there's two categories that I like to lump things into: cost reductions and revenue generators. Right, so it was the same thing when the internet came out. The initial things is, oh my goodness, I can save money here and I can save money there, and indeed you can. And that was a major advancement. When we look at, I can, cut my script writers by, X%, the writers in Hollywood are appropriately scared to death of what the hell happens going forward, and appropriately so. But it's the revenue generators. The things that create more and more revenue is what isn't understood, and I think that's a place. If I'm an investor, I'm looking out there for new applications that generate revenue that couldn't before.
That's right. So that's a good way to think about it. Let's talk a little bit about some management lessons that you've had. You've now managed teams and built teams through a couple different cycles of hardware and networking. What are some of the kind of hard-earned lessons and hard scar tissue that comes from having gone through those cycles that younger builders today that may be listening would be wise to adopt?
People, very rarely are they exceptional at all things. As a matter of fact, probably never. But they always have something that makes them special. And so the key as a manager is to be able to identify what makes them special and give an opportunity to express that specialness. The trait that makes someone good in one environment makes them a real pain in the neck in another environment.
What's an example of that?
Attention to detail.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, well, there's a time when attention to detail is life-saving, and there's a time where it slows the process down, right? And so you just, as a manager, you've got to be able to recognize that, value it, but also understand when to use it and when not to use it.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge believer in people, and I view my job as I need to create the environment to allow the special traits of those people to come out.
Yep.
If I do that, well, then I'm getting, great bang for my buck.
Yeah.
The number one thing of any successful, I believe, any truly successful manager is you've got to be able to hire quality people, and then you've got to create the environment in which they succeed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You mentioned your wife. My wife is infinitely smarter than I am. She has a saying, as a manager, every strength has shadows.
Yeah.
And I
there
think
you go.
it
That's
kind of
similar.
speaks to exactly what you're saying, which is you have to lean into the strength that somebody has, but do it with the appreciation of the shadows that it brings. The blind spot sometimes, if you're
100%.
hard charging, sometimes you might not have the EQ, and as a manager, you have to curtail that person. And sometimes somebody is very, very thoughtful, but it may mean that they don't speak up as much. And you want the thoughtfulness, but you have to maybe draw out the insights. I've learned a lot watching her as she manages people to lean into those strengths and shadows.
So I had that today, and I turned to one of the managers that worked for me and said, listen, I know I'm going to try and make decisions too fast. And I need you to put tension on me so that we don't make them fast. I will make the call, decide what level of confidence we need in order to ultimately make that decision, but you need that tension. And a good round table or oval table of management has those different skill sets and perspectives. Right? We have a bunch of advisors, people that have been in the industry for decades that I put on the advisory board. But I really ask them. I put them in a room today. We had a time where we got to put them in a room together. I'm not an organizational specialist. I'm a technology guy. I need them to help me, tell me what I need to look out for. And what are the skill sets I need to fill out the organization?
As a leader, do you think the missing component of that is some level of self-realization and self-actualization? As a CEO, as a founder, do you feel like that's missing with kind of the younger generation of builders?
The younger version of Dave, the younger version of me, yeah, we did things that were more confidence than I deserved. And you live through that and you said, yeah, that was a mistake. I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Right? And I should trust my people, or at least know what I can trust them and what my responsibility is back to them. So
yeah, you mentioned this idea of making decisions with haste, but knowing when to correct. How do you set up product engineering teams to be able to behave that way, but still make sure that you're keeping reliability and performance at the top of mind?
There are phases of a startup company. Phase one, I'm now hiring individual contributors or small group contributors, but they really know their topic exceedingly well. You can have 20, 30 of those people, they'll self-assemble. Right? They know how to get something done in their sector. Don't slow them down, speed them up, right? At some point, you're going to transition from concept to, quasi prototype, and now I want to go make a product. Okay, now you need to get organized. Now you need rigor, you need specs, you need spec sheets, you need part numbers, you need all that type of stuff. Okay, that's a different phase and a very different skill set, and you got to be prepared to have that organization to support that skill set. Right, and so everywhere in the company you've got different. In the big company, don't over-organize your innovation team. They will self-assemble. Just give them the right sandbox and definition of that sandbox to play in.
When you think about the hustle culture that permeates Silicon Valley and San Francisco and the Bay Area, and this this new term, this 996 that's coming out. I loved kind of hearing your contrarian perspective on this, which is that's not always the most productive. So Dave, how do you survive in this AI era without embracing 996 hustle mentality?
Well, first off, if you require 996 when people won't naturally give you 996, well, that's just a short-term fallacy, right?
Yeah.
And so, I spend lots of hours at AttoTude because, frankly, I love it. And I love the people there. Getting back to your basic question is, when do people really spend their engagement? They spend their engagement around things they're passionate about. If the passion is there and the community is there to support that passion, they'll be thinking about it 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Right? And driving it. So manage to that. Don't manage to the hours. And I also think that and again, get back to my gray hair wisdom here, success doesn't come from working 18 hours a day. Success comes from prioritizing what's important. And so you got 30 things to do. Okay, that's great. You got a lot of stuff to do. Tell me what the top 5 are and do them. And if you got time to do the next 5, wonderful. Do the top 5, and you will go so much faster if you stick to the priorities and make sure you've got enough intuition that you don't have to grind through things that aren't important.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think it's so easy in this current AI era, again, with some things like, code generation and the amount of competition that's come up with companies where founders feel like they just want to do more. They want to deliver more. And I think, to your point as an investor, sometimes when you're just guiding young founders in this, focus wins, right? You just pick one thing and do it exceptionally well and be known for doing that thing well. And enough value will accrue, enough stickiness will accrue that you don't have to spread your focus thin. But I just think naturally, and often, the younger somebody is, the less family obligations and things they have. I became a dad in the last couple of years. Like,
congratulations.
Thank you. I used to think I was busy, and then I realized what busy really meant. But I think that's the reality of it. The younger the founder, the more they feel like they can take on everything. And then that 996 mentality permeates.
And you're and again, I'm not discouraging people from working.
Sure.
But you want to work because you're passionate. And then stick to the priorities and what's important. If you make those decisions and you get enough data, and you don't have to have 100% of the data. If you get, in general, I bet you we make most of our big decisions somewhere around 65-70% confidence levels, not 95%. Okay, and so if you do that, you'll make a decision quicker, but every now and then you might have to change direction.
Can we explore that idea of confidence levels? I love that. Decision science was one of my favorite courses when I was at Carnegie Mellon. It's not a well understood science. Do you do that confidence interval conversation with kind of every major decision, or is it for basic everyday things in stand-ups? How do those confidence intervals play in your management style?
Well, as CEO, if I have to, I will make a decision regardless. If I have to. But that should be 1 out of 100. Right. So you if you've done a good job with your management team, they all have different skill sets around it, and frankly, they should have different experiences. So when they look at a problem, they're going to look back at their history, and they're going to have an intuition that said, I can solve that problem, right? Or, hey, I don't care what you say, you're just not going to solve that problem, right? And their intuition, they don't need the data. They can look at it and give you a heads up. And okay, you go around, you get different people's perspectives. Frankly, it's the way AI works. You take different data sets, you take different brains, you interconnect them, and as you communicate across it, you can come up with a pretty reasonable decision process. If you find that 4 out of 5 people feel perfectly comfortable, and the 5th one isn't going to draw a line in the sand about it, well, they make the decision and move on. I think that too many people will say, no, we got to find out some more, which is cool. You can do that, but understand, at that point in time, you are asking people to do things that is no longer a priority. Trust your intuitions. If you've hired well, their intuitions are correct.
Well, that's why it comes back to the idea of hiring well and spending a lot of time thinking about who you put around the team.
Understand their strengths.
Have you found that's gotten easier or harder in today's environment?
I will tell you, I've never seen in the AI data center world, this place is moving at rocket speed. Rocket speed. And it's so you you better make decisions fast. You better make decisions fast. And in the investment environment, your startups, are you going to be frugal, but understand it costs you a lot of money to be late.
Well said. I'd love to close with you kind of looking ahead into the future. What is a consensus viewpoint today about AI, data centers, networking, that you feel like when we look back in 5 years, people are going to be dead wrong about?
I spent a little bit of time talking about energy,
Yeah.
energy supply in the data center. You are going to find that it is the data center that helped you solve our energy problem. And it's not the AI algorithms. If you want to transform your energy infrastructure, you need a growth market. Data centers are your energy growth market, and therefore you can afford to put in new energy infrastructure. And I do believe there's a lot of really cool parallels between what happened in telecom and what is happening today. In telecom, cost of bandwidth dropped ballpark 25-30% per year for 30 years. Unbelievable pricing collapse, and it was all because the demand was there. I love to tell the story that pre-Y2K, so in late 90s, the busiest day in the network was Mother's Day, right? And it's because the network was designed for phone calls, right? Okay, well, Mother's Day is a complete non-event. at least from the network's perspective today.
Yeah.
And we went from a people talking to people network to a machine talking to machine network. Transformed it all. And if you look and say draw that parallel to energy, if the cost of energy was to drop 30% per year, like the cost of data did, because the demand was driving, our society would be radically different.
Wow.
For the better.
Yeah.
Radically different. And the only way you could ever meet that energy need is if you didn't burn fuel. And so it's a really fascinating, I find it a fascinating paradigm that a lot of people are fighting the data center growth appropriately because they are causing short-term issues in residential supply.
Yeah.
Okay. Got to figure out how to solve that one. But in the long term, it is the actual growth and demand of energy and the economics that drive that demand of energy that's going to allow us to transform our energy infrastructure.
Yeah, and if we do a little bit of extrapolation there, right, it's like what becomes available when these technologies become proliferated, right?
Right.
We've had some component of LiDAR for years, but as the cost curve came down, you get to put them on cars, and now you get to put them in, humanoids, and you get to put them inside of factories, and things start to get automated. As cost curves come down, new use cases that we haven't even thought about. When I think about energy, what other kinds of things can be automated in the home to make our lives better when the cost of energy comes down to a point where it can be accessible?
Cost of energy can come down, and actually the wholesale cost of energy is coming down. First thing, desalination. Huge market and a huge need. If the cost of desalination drops, and it's all energy, right? Well, then our water supply, our streams, our fisheries, our farming, our water table, all that stuff gets solved.
Yeah.
Food supply. If I have a 3D farming and all of a sudden I've got very low cost energy, farming gets revolutionized, food supply gets revolutionized. There's just a whole boatload of things that happen as the cost of energy drops and the quality of life for all societies improves.
What's the time scale on that, Dave? Is that 5
Well,
years, 10 years?
yeah,
Are we waiting 30 again? Fusion is always 10 years away.
I actually got a letter from one of the companies I invested in. They're claiming 2031.
Oh, okay.
On the grid in 2031, and so that's we'll see. But anyways, we don't need fusion to solve our problem. It is an added source. We have various technologies that really do a wonderful job today, and if you have that growing market, that revenue stream that allows you to invest in the transformation, well then we can really solve a lot of problems for that.
Yeah. Well, we try to do our part as a small drop in that bucket to try to put quality content and information out there for folks. And Dave, I'm so grateful to you for not just sharing the work you're doing at AttoTude, but also the hard-learned lessons in management and investing that you've shared today. This was super fun for me to do, and I'm so glad to have you on the show.
Cool. Thanks, Jay.